Hello, Megan. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, Chloe. It's an absolute pleasure to be back here chatting to you about all things, hopefully, gut health.
Yes, amazing. You've been on the podcast before when your first book came out. That was probably was that 2 years ago? Trying to
It
think exactly when
was,
it
yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah.
We did it in the Penguin offices in London, and now obviously we're doing this on Zoom, slightly different times. And I was just reflecting about when we first met, before either of us had written any books, before you had your massive Instagram, even probably about 4 years ago. We met in Old Street for a coffee, and it seems like such a long time ago, but it's
Doesn't it?
amazing to see what you've done since then.
Likewise, I think, yeah, both of our careers have like completely not changed, but as in they have gone in different, slightly different directions, which is exciting, I think.
Very, very exciting. So, congratulations on your new book, Eat More, Live Well. I've had a PDF. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on a physical copy, and it is brilliant. It's beautifully set out. I remember this from your last book, how it was set out, and this one I think is even better. It's really easy to read and digest, as you say, the fun. And so much in there from science to just really practical advice and things that people can get started with, and simplifying these topics. Can you share a bit about what the book is about and what made you want to write this book?
Yeah, so thank you for that feedback. I've just got my physical copy, and it's like, holding your baby for the first time. It is very, very exciting. But yeah, essentially, I wrote Eat More, Live Well as I guess, a follow-up from my first book, Eat Yourself Healthy, where I guess the focus of that was to help people get on top of their digestive symptoms. And then following that, people, got thousands of messages on social media, people saying, okay, that's great. My gut health, has improved somewhat, but I want kind of more recipes, more understanding of how to really nourish my gut. So I guess if Eat Yourself Healthy was more about getting on top of your digestive symptoms, Eat More, Live Well certainly zooms out and essentially speaks to everyone and anyone who wants to eat in a way that is better aligned based on the science with how their body and their gut microbes work. So essentially, the science is saying that we all should be eating more plants. And it's really this concept where the science has led us just really in the last couple of years. And it's where I developed what I call the diversity diet from. And there is these 5 principles where I get people to follow them, and have seen firsthand in clinic how it's transformed people's lives in very real and surprising ways. So it's not just about better gut health, but things like better mental health, if people are going through the menopause, lower risk of hot flushes and things like that. And I guess people new to this area don't necessarily understand, but there is hardcore science showing that how we nourish and treat our gut bacteria inside of us, can mechanistically improve things like mental health, because they are connected. And we've got the clinical trials now to show for that.
It's so interesting, and I definitely want to hear more about that and the science behind how what we eat and our gut health can help our mental health. Can you say, what is the diversity diet then? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, well, it's certainly not about dieting. So it's about diet, i.e. food. So I think that's a really important one. So these 5 principles that it really underpins. The first one is eating mostly plants. And I think this is an important one because there is a lot of kind of myths out there that if we want to look after not just our gut health, but overall health, we have to go vegan, i.e. 100% plant-based. Now, that's not what the science is saying. The science is saying absolutely the base of our diet should be plants, hence the word plant-based, not plants only. What we choose to add on top of that is completely up to us. In fact, if we're just looking at health on its own, the science does suggest that adding some animal foods in, like oily fish and fermented dairy, may lower our risk of different nutrition deficiencies. Now, I completely understand why someone might want to go vegan because of animal cruelty and religious reasons. But, when we think about just health, going vegan doesn't actually mean we're any healthier. And in some cases could increase our risk if we're not really cautious of getting all the nutrients into our diet. So that's the first principle. Mostly plants, not necessarily only plants. The second one is this concept of diversity all the way. So trying to get in as many different types of plants into our diets as we possibly can. And this is really founded or backed by the science, which shows that each different plant, and when I talk about plants, I'm not talking about just fruit and veg. I call them the super six. So these 6 different plant-based food categories. So you got the whole grains, the nuts and seeds, obviously your fruit and veg, but also your legumes, your beans and pulses, and even your herbs and spices count. So there is, a wealth of different flavor within this plant-based world that I think sometimes people don't realize. And what the science shows is that each different type of plant category actually delivers different types of nutrients, which not only nourish our body, but also nourish the gut bacteria. So instead of just going for the same broccoli and bananas and apples, think about ways you can really diversify your diet. So get the steamed mixed pack of vegetables. Instead of just having, wheat or rice, why don't you get the packs that's got 4 different types of grains in it? And often they're not at any extra cost and extra effort, and are available in most supermarkets nowadays if you just browse the aisle. So where you can, think diversity. That's the second principle. The third principle is about inclusion, not exclusion. And, I think this is an important one to touch on, particularly as we move into January, where people are thinking, oh, I've got to go on a diet. I need to cut out all my favorite foods. But actually, that's not what the science says. Even if your goal is about weight management or, things like better heart health, actually, the focus really is about what you're adding into your diet. So adding those extra plants, you don't necessarily have to cut out your favorite foods. And that's one of the things that, I talk about a lot in Eat More, Live Well with the recipes, is that I show how you can make some, easy, quick hacks to your favorite foods like Rocky Road. I've added in prebiotics there. So cut out the butter and the biscuits and added in popcorn and dark chocolate and chewy dried fruit and all different types of roasted nuts. So you still get all of that delicious flavor, but you're adding extra plants there. So I think that is something we need to keep in mind. Think about what you can add into your diet, not what you cut out of your diet. And also that mental kind of frame of mind around a food is really important for building a relationship or maintaining a relationship with food, because so many people I see in clinic, because they've read headlines that certain foods are bad, they've actually got a really unhealthy relationship with food. And the science shows that relationship alone can trigger things like bloating and tummy upset, irrespective of what you're actually eating. And that comes down to the gut-brain axis, which I'm sure we'll go into. The fourth principle is all about going for whole and not refined plants. And this is, a topic which has come from, the fast food world, where it's trendy to go vegan. So they've got these mock meats and the fake cheese and everything. And although they are plant-based, you can get plant-based croissants and, potato chips that are plant-based, deep fried. They actually don't have all that nutrition that we know that whole plants actually have. So where you can, making your own sort of chickpea burgers, again, recipes in the book to do that, and your own cashew cheese, again, it literally takes 10 minutes to make, really easy, tastes better as well. But what it does is contains all of those plant chemicals which feed your body versus the processed ones, which have kind of had them all stamped out during the processing and also contain a lot of additives. And at King's, we're doing some research looking at potentially some of the negative impacts of different food additives on our body. So we just need to be a bit more savvy around, I guess, how we approach a lot of these ultra-processed foods. And then the fifth and final principle is about taste, pause, and enjoy. And this is an important for the reason of it's not just about what we put into our body, but also how we eat that impacts things like our digestion, how much we're able to extract the nutrition out. So I think that is a really important one, because at the end of the day, food should be enjoyed. I hate it when I see people in clinic where they forgo their favorite foods and they just have really bland, like steamed veggies and think that they're doing good for themselves. And actually, that's not the case, because we know the more diversity, the more flavor, but also the better relationship and kind of the better your mental health can be around food.
Love that. Love those 5 principles. And I really like that you're talking about eating more and including things rather than cutting things out, because it can be a really unhealthy mindset if we're cutting things out. I've had that experience myself of kind of cutting things out, and then it's not very mentally healthy to be kind of, I don't know, if you beat yourself up if you eat gluten or dairy, and then it can just cause us problems, I think, cutting things out. It's like a lot of our brains, I think, are not very good at coping with doing that. It's not very healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the studies have shown that if you are cutting out any food groups, then actually that can have a negative impact on your gut bacteria because they love this diversity. So essentially you can starve them. And we know that people who've got better mental health, better heart health, better overall health and well-being actually have a more diverse range of gut bacteria. So I like to think of them as kind of like these little our superpowers within us, and the more different types we have, the better chance we have at fighting against the increased risk of mental health issues with COVID and even actually immune health. There's really interesting research coming out linking the importance of our gut and immune health. So we call this the gut immune axis. So nourishing the gut has really measurable impacts on our immune strength.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask you more about that in a moment. I want to just go back to the vegan versus plant-based thing, because as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, veganism is no animal products at all, and it's got to do with the ethical aspects and kind of it being a lifestyle, whereas plant-based, maybe if you're plant-based, you eat mostly plants, but maybe sometimes you eat other things. Is that right?
Well, I mean, historically, I think that's where the concept of veganism came from, but it now has turned into this trend. And like I said, I understand for cultural and religious and obviously animal cruelty reasons why someone would want to go vegan. But, in terms of the health aspect, that's obviously not necessary, as I highlighted. In terms of, I guess, the word plant-based, again, I think there's a lot of myths around or misunderstanding of where the definition has come from. And what it actually means. And people have different interpretations. So a lot of people, when they're talking about plant-based, actually they think it's vegan. But the clue really is, I guess, in the name, where the base of your diet is plants, and whatever, like you said, you choose to add on top of that really comes down to your preferences. So you can, be 100% plant-based, or you can be 80% plant-based. That really is up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying as well before about how it's not always healthy to be vegan. I've noticed, because I've been a vegetarian my whole life, and we'll quite often choose kind of vegan or vegetarian restaurants if we're going out. But I'd say 50% of the vegan restaurants are kind of healthy, kind of whole grain, whole meal, organic type restaurants. And the other half are kind of vegan junk food restaurants where everything's deep fried, everything's like trying to be something it's not, which is not. I don't know. I suppose people that have given up meat, maybe they have a craving for those sorts of things. I've never eaten meat. So I'm like, why would you want to make something look like meat? That doesn't make any sense to me. But because if we're eating loads of those things, it's not actually healthier. They could be deep fried. They could be really processed, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've got a case study on a client that I had where she, like you were saying, went vegan because she'd read that it was better for health. And she thought, hey, look, I want to be really healthy. And I saw her in clinic about 3 months after she'd embarked on her vegan diet. And she had gained quite a lot of weight. Her skin had broken out and her mood had really reduced. And I was like, oh gosh. So I looked at her food diary, compared it pre and post. So pre-vegan and while she was vegan. And absolutely, you could see the nutrition density of her diet was much reduced on this, vegan diet, because she was doing things like having the mock meats, having the fake cheeses, thinking, hey, they're based on plants, they must be better for me. Then actually, if she was looking at how she was eating before, yes, she was having some animal foods, but actually most of the food she was having was very wholesome, using like chickpeas and lentils as her base of meals, often maybe with a little bit of meat in there. And so what we did, I said to her, I explained to her where the evidence was at. I said, understand if you want to continue to be vegan for, animal cruelty reasons, etc. But hey, why don't we switch out the fake meats and actually, you have things like silken tofu, which actually, makes the most amazing creamy texture. I use that in a lot of my recipes, available literally from most mainstream supermarkets, fairly cheap. And, things like the cashew cheese. Anyway, in the end, she decided to actually, start to include some animal foods back into her diet. But she lost that extra weight, plus a little bit more. Her skin went back to normal. And mentally, she said that she felt better than she'd ever felt before. So, yeah, I think the proof is in the pudding, right?
That's really interesting. Really interesting. In the book, you talk about getting 30 plant-based points each week. Can you say what that means? And 30 sounds, I don't know, does it sound like a lot? But I think I think what you teach is that it's actually quite easy to incorporate that.
Yeah, look, it does from the outset. You go, oh God, but like I mentioned, the plant-based groups, there is that super six. So think of your different whole grains, your nuts and seeds, your beans and pulses, your fruit, your veg, and even herbs and spices count. So things like dark chocolate, you get a quarter of a point. So hey,
nice.
And actually it's really easy. You know, just add a teaspoon of mixed seeds here, you get 4 points. Instead of just getting maybe chickpeas, get the 4 bean mix, you get an extra 3 points. So actually it's really attainable to get to your 30 points. In fact, in the book, I've got these different types of menu plans, those for people with sensitive tummies, those who lead busy lives, those for family feasting. And actually each of those menu plans deliver about 70 plant points a week without being, I've price matched them without costing more or having to buy extra ingredients. It's just that mindset when you go to the store, trying to get the options where there's diversity already in the packet. So like the mixed seeds, the mixed nuts, the mixed nut butters, all of that sort of stuff. So just think mix wherever you can, and you'll be smashing the plant points. But I guess if you want the science, because I know you love the science, that number 30 actually came from a scientific study which showed people who had at least 30 different types of foods per week had better gut health than those who had only 10 different types. So still ate plenty of plants, but ate the same sort of 10 on repeat, which I think a lot of us can fall into. I mean, before I was, really on top of all the research, I used to kind of just recycle the same Ocado order and, just habit buy and things like that. But actually, when you start to change your mindset, it's really easy to start diversifying things out.
Yeah, I love that there's also science behind that as well, because I'm sure, I don't know if we spoke about this last time, but I'm sure that the thing of 5 a day, there wasn't actually evidence for that. It was just kind of what's attainable. What can we don't want to put people
just
off
like
by
this
saying
marketing campaign. I know, and completely ignored. I mean, that's very outdated now because it completely ignored the importance of the diversity, the science around our gut microbiota, which is a landmark scientific discovery. And, every week we're learning more and more about how these microorganisms within us, literally trillions of them, are doing things like influencing our hormones, producing vitamins, communicating with our brain, etc.
When you're talking about things like beans and lentils, if someone's not used to eating those foods, if maybe they are more used to having the more processed foods or food out of a packet, is it possible to sort of train our taste buds to dislike those foods and to like the other foods?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Again, I have a case study literally about one of my clients. He was an A&E reg, so a medic. He never really liked plants that much. He understood, obviously, the science behind eating more plants. But he came to see me with his wife, actually, because they wanted to get pregnant. And his wife had read that actually it's not just her nutrition that, may have a role, but also the hubby's or the partner's nutrition. And he was on board with that. And actually, he just lost his dad to diet-related heart disease. So he was, motivated to make some changes. But one of the things he said to me at the start is, I just don't like plants. Like, I've tried. And I said, look, I completely understand that, but trust me, I've done it with my own husband before, who used to be very much only meat. Your taste buds actually do change. In fact, they regenerate every 10 or so days. So over time, they can start to, change. But anyway, the proof is in the pudding again. So we went through, I slowly started to increase more plants, but also didn't have like boring broccoli. I made sure if he was having something like broccoli, it was like roasted with garlic and soy. So it tasted really nice. Things like Brussels sprouts he hated, but I turned it into a Brussels sprout pesto with walnuts and pine nuts, a little bit of garlic. So, it's often about how you really dress the plants. And that's something I deal a lot with in the book in terms of really simple hacks to make plants really taste good and enhance their flavor instead of them being perceived as boring. But anyway, so slowly he started to increase more into his diet. And then I didn't see him for about a 6-week gap. And then I saw him again in clinic, and he said to me, Megan, you'll never believe what happened. I said, what? And he's like, well, I was having a really hard day, like a all-nighter at work, so A&E reg. And, I often used to treat myself to a Big Mac when that happens. So on my way home at 4 a.m., I used to go and stop in through the drive-through. So I did that. And when I bit into that burger, I was actually disappointed that it didn't give me that same buzz, that same flavor buzz that it used to. I was like, what is this? So, I mean, that's just an anecdote, but we do have the science around how our taste buds change and regenerate. In fact, actually, another example is with the cereal industry. So we know historically cereals were really high in salt. And over a period of around 10 years, the big guys reduced by, I think it was like 300 tons of salt in our breakfast cereals. And we actually didn't notice because they gradually started to reduce it. So just another example of how actually our taste buds do change, and, you know, if we let them, essentially.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that sounds delicious. Broccoli with garlic and soy sauce and Brussels sprouts with pesto. That sounds really good. I'm definitely going to have to look at more of the recipes. I've got a few in mind that I'm going to make already, but definitely going to experiment with that. So you touched on before the gut immune axis. Okay, what is that? What is that? Yeah. What do you mean by that?
So I think, you know, first things first, what are we talking about when we talk about the gut? So actually, it's this 9-meter long digestive tract that delivers food from entry all the way to exit. So we each have this 9 meters of tubing, essentially, coiled within us. Now, that's what gut health is. Now, along that 9 meters actually lays 70% of our immune system. So we certainly know, and we see in the scientific studies, that people who have better gut health also have stronger immune systems. In particular, we know that the gut bacteria, which lives along that 9-meter digestive tract, particularly in the lower parts, and we call the scientific name for that is the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome is thought to really have a strong impact on our immune system. There is actually really fascinating research coming to the forefront around COVID-19 and showing that gut health, having good gut health, is not going to prevent you from getting it. But the studies do suggest that if you get COVID-19 and have good gut health, it reduces your chance of becoming severely unwell with symptoms. You know, there are some pilot studies underway looking at specific probiotics in the actual, alongside standard medical therapy, and actually reducing the risk of pneumonia in those who do develop a severe case of COVID-19. It's really fascinating stuff. Again, just as an anecdote, I like to share, you know, my husband is a NHS GP. So, you know, when was it? 2020 when COVID first came out, in like February. I remember reading it and thinking, oh my God, like Thomas is doing home visits with all these like vulnerable people while everyone else was isolating. He was out there seeing people still. And I was like, I need to do whatever I can. And at King's, I'd actually started working from home. So I had a bit of time on my hands. So I really delved into the research, looking at how we could bolster the immune system, because I wanted to make sure his diet and lifestyle were packed, and actually emerged like 7 days later with an action plan, which is pretty much underpinned by the diversity diet, because, you know, gut health and immune system go hand in hand. And what I did was just, you know, really simple ways, because I was still, you know, working full time at King's, and Thomas is obviously working crazy hours, but made sure I boosted his diet with as many different types of plants from all things plant-based food groups. So I don't want to name drop products, but Tesco actually have a really brilliant product. It's got, it's called the 9-grain mix, and it's super, super affordable, so cheap. And it's got 9 different grains in it and takes 10 minutes to cook. So instead of having the rice, I just cooked that for him as the base of his meal to get in that diversity. Like I said before, instead of just having things like cauliflower, you know, I'd get the 7, or not 7, I think it's more like 4 different types of steamed veggies in the pack, and add that to the grains. So wherever I could, I was just adding in extra plants. And actually in Eat More Live Well, I have these 1-minute snacks, which again add more extra plants, and they were literally what I used to get him to have at work. So I would make them and put in these little lunchbox. I'm not a domesticated goddess. I never make him any food, but I knew that was really important because he wasn't going to do it himself, to get on top of it. And you know what? We found out that actually he did have COVID. He did get COVID because he had the test once it came available, but actually he got 0 symptoms at all. And he said, you know what, despite all the stress of work, I actually feel better than I ever have through kind of the extra food or the extra plants that you've been giving me. But also we did things like we went to bed at 10 o'clock each night. We were really strict about that. We did like 5 minutes of mindfulness, all the things we know nourish the gut and the immune system. So not just diet, but yeah, you know, I think it is important at this time where a lot of people are getting really scared and worried. they've got the vaccine, but now they need to get the boosters. There are lifestyle things we know we can do to put us in the best position that if we do get COVID, we can really try and protect ourselves as much as possible. And I guess not to, drive the importance of, I guess, this invisible world, our gut microbiome. But remember, COVID-19 is one type of virus. We actually have, trillions of microbes, including some viruses in our gut. So think how powerful COVID-19 has been to the world. It's been devastating. Thankfully, most viruses and other microorganisms are really beneficial, but we shouldn't underestimate their potential. So it's just another reason why we should really be nourishing this community within us, because it does have so much power and potential. And if we nourish it, it will look after us. If we neglect it, then it might not, be as nice to us as it can be.
I love that idea of it being a community within us. I love that. Kind of makes it sound, yeah, obviously it is there helping us, but it is invisible, as you say. It can be maybe something that, unless you have outward symptoms of gut disturbance, maybe you can really forget about it. So it's so important to remind ourselves. And my gosh, like the work you're doing, if it can help with our immune system, how important is that? And it kind of surprises me, like, well, it doesn't surprise me that the government don't talk about this, but I feel like everyone needs to know this. Everyone needs to know like how important this is, because we don't know what's the next pandemic going to be.
I know. I mean, I wish I could get into the government world, because I think they're focused on like anti-obesity, count calories. It's just so the wrong way. It's not in line with the science. It's so backward thinking. It's not what people should be doing to achieve, stronger immune systems. We do actually see that adding in plants, not counting calories, if weight loss is your goal, actually does result in significant amounts of weight loss. And that's, we know, because the gut bacteria are very much linked with our not immune system, but our metabolism. So if people's goal is actually weight management, then actually all they need to do, according to science, is focus on the extra plants, the diversity they can add in, and not fixate on counting calories, which scientifically we know is actually not that accurate. For example, almonds actually contain 30% less calories than it says on the packet. And, that's a whole lot of science talk. I do refer to a bit of that in the book. But yeah, I think the whole world of calorie counting has been very much misunderstood. Another example, like a banana and a Kit Kat, same calories. But we know the banana not only keeps us fuller for longer, so we're less likely to go back for a second one. It's got potassium in it for the heart health, prebiotics for the gut, and also has some serotonin in it. Think of the Kit Kat, doesn't have any of that. So yeah, it's fascinating how they can get away with that. But one day I will get the message out there.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it so far. Yeah, going back to the calorie thing, I guess. If I remember correctly from, I don't know if this is school, or I studied food science and nutrition at university, but they measure a calorie by burning a food and then seeing how it raises the temperature of water. So that's got nothing to do with like how your body processes the food at all.
I'm so impressed with that. Yeah, exactly. And we know that our digestive system is so intricate. It's so far from just burning a food. Actually, we do malabsorb a lot of the food in many cases, and actually the bacteria metabolize it, and therefore it kind of reduce the calorie quantity of that food. So yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the mental health aspect of this. So I personally have found, and it almost feels a bit like, when I talk about this, I don't talk about it that much, but it's almost like a little bit taboo sometimes to talk about what you eat and mental health, because I personally try to not have a lot of sugar. That doesn't mean I never have sugar, but I don't have a lot of like chocolates all the time, even though I ate some cake yesterday because of my boyfriend's birthday. But anyway, I try not to, because
I've got some great recipes in there, so you can still have your cake and eat it too. It's just adding in extra plants. So like, I've got carrot cake, just literally add in carrots, add in quinoa as the base, add in walnuts, and then you've turned in, a food that's very kind of treaty into one that still tastes delicious, but also nourishes your body and gives back.
Okay, good. So adding in, yes, that's another thing to, another reminder of that. But it does seem to make a difference for me, not having loads of junk food. It's not like rocket science, but it makes a difference to my mental health massively. What is the impact then? So how does that interact? How does the food we eat interact with our gut and then with our mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate, Chloe, because when, I was studying dietetics back a decade plus ago, a little bit old now, we were very much taught that, yeah, maybe diet could have some role in mental health, but hey, let's not overstep where the evidence is at. So you'd be very cautious. So that's, one of the reasons I think why there's this big taboo about it. But actually in 2017, there was a landmark study, which you may be aware of, called the SMILES trial. And it was the first time, because it was such a robust study, and I talk about it in Eat Yourself Healthy, where it was for the first time showed that actually nourishing the gut with heaps of different types of plants, not plants only, they still had oily fish, fermented dairy, loads of extra virgin olive oil, etc., but actually nourishing the gut with loads of plants. In fact, the amount of fiber they delivered, and remember the backbone of plants is dietary fiber, was incredibly high. So in the UK, we have like less than 20 grams of fiber a day. So it means we have quite little plants. The government recommends 30 grams. This diet gave 50 grams of dietary fiber from whole plants, so not like a processed type. What they did is randomize half of the participants who had moderate to severe depression to this gut boosting diet with the 50 grams of fiber. It's very much around like the Mediterranean diet. And the other half got a befriending type of counseling. They followed both groups for 12 weeks, and then they reassessed their mental health to see whether, there was any difference. And it was really important they had this control group to make sure any benefit of the diet wasn't because they were seeing like a research dietitian, but actually because of the food. And what they found, those in the diet group, 32% of them had a significant improvement in their depression scores, which would have classified them as no longer clinically depressed. In the control group, that was about 8%. And, these people have moderate to severe depression. I just think that's so powerful. As a disclosure, they all stayed on their antidepressant medication. So if anyone's listening to this going, oh, I'm just going to go cold turkey, definitely don't do that. It should give you hope that as an additional therapy, it can be hugely powerful. And certainly anecdotally in clinic, working with patients, GPs, I've actually gotten some of my patients off their antidepressants via just really nourishing their gut health. Now, that's not the case for everyone because, mental health issues is very heterogeneous. But, we now have this really strong evidence. So I think we should be talking about it more, about really trying to foster our gut diversity through loading it with the dietary fiber, which feeds the gut bacteria. They then in turn are thought to produce a range of different chemicals, which then are thought to some pass the blood-brain barrier and can help stimulate more positive mindsets.
Okay, that's very, very encouraging, very encouraging. If people are listening to this and thinking, I can't afford to eat that many plants, what would you say to that?
Firstly, you're not alone. A lot of people think that way as well, because there are many myths out there. And if you look at a lot of these health food stores, they'll want you to believe that. They'll want you to believe you have to buy their super expensive quinoa and mixed nuts and all of these fancy foods to have good health. But that is so against everything I believe in. There should be no price tag on health. It shouldn't be a case of, only the wealthy people can look after themselves. And it's a really big bugbear. And in fact, in the book, I have a section on cost-saving hacks. And I actually share a study which compared the grocery basket cost of families who went on an intervention, which was a plant-based intervention. So they reduced down the meat. And actually, they showed they saved money by going plant-based. But, some of the hacks I talk about in the book is, buying the plant-based foods that are in season, and how you tell that. I do have a seasonal chart in the book, but actually it's by cost. So, if strawberries are like £4 for a punnet, they're not in season. That's so expensive. I would not be buying that. And then also things like, just going down your mainstream local supermarket and checking out the products, you'll be surprised. Things like quinoa and buckwheat are actually available at no extra cost compared to a lot of the main wheats and pastas that we're having. We need to be careful that we don't fall in to that belief that, you have to be wealthy to look after your health. Other things is like, when you go to these vegan stores, they have like these vegan energy balls that are like £3 for like half a mouthful. So in the book, I've got recipes where you make equally delicious ones, if not more delicious, for like 5p or something per serving. So I usually keep a few of them in my bag when I'm going around, because I hate being hungry and I don't want to pay a ridiculous amount for something I know I can make so cheaply and easily at home.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's really good. Good to know. And I guess if you're buying things like the kind of the fake cheeses, or you're going into Whole Foods, and anything in Whole Foods is just probably overpriced, but there are other ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be really expensive. And yeah, I love it. That's definitely a focus in the book, where you're kind of showing that it doesn't have to be out of reach financially for people.
Yeah. Also skill wise, you don't have to be an amazing chef. Like, I am an amateur chef. So all my recipes kind of reflect that they are really easy. I don't use all these fancy techniques, because again, you shouldn't have to have gone to a nutrition school or, a chef school to be able to look after your body.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Yeah. I'm not very, cooking. I keep telling myself I need to get more into it. I'm more of an assembler. I like some of the
together.
Yeah, some of the recipes actually that I'm interested in. You've got breakfast pita pizza in the book, and veg fritters. That seems very manageable for me. So I'm definitely gonna try to make those.
Yeah, I definitely utilize the stir fry mixes where it's already kind of mixed, cut up. It's like throw that in, because we all live busier and busier lives, right? Even though often we're in lockdown, I just feel like there's so many things going on. Probably social media not helping. So, we don't have time to like slave away in the kitchen and make all of this, incredible food. But we don't need to for good gut health.
Well, one question I quite often ask guests on this podcast is how do they manage their stress? What are the things that you do in your life to manage your mental health and your stress levels?
Yeah, look, I think this has definitely been something I've thought a lot more about since having Archie. So my little baby is now 8 months and it's absolutely flown, but I now feel like such an idiot when I used to kind of say to people, spend like, half an hour doing mindfulness every day, because a lot of, working parents actually don't have 30 minutes to sit and breathe. But what I do personally is every night before, in bed, my hubby's already asleep, I do 10 minutes of mindfulness. And that's just really manageable for me. And, a lot of the breathing exercises I find not only help de-stress up here, but also de-stress the gut. Because if, I've been stressing thoughts all day, it really does strangle the gut. And I don't get gut symptoms. But I notice that, around really stressful periods, I might be slightly more vulnerable to extra bloating. And that really is that gut-brain axis at play. But I find that spending that 10 minutes can really help with that. And I know you have incredible, strategies and recommendations about mindfulness. You certainly are a guru in that space.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's a good reminder for anyone listening. I think people don't necessarily realize the link between maybe things like bloating and stress levels or IBS. So a good reminder that taking care of your stress levels can help with your gut, and your diet can help with your mind, and it's all connected in that way.
Yeah, well, Chloe, we've spoken about it before, but in case the listeners haven't heard, there is really impressive research around irritable bowel syndrome, which we know affects around 10% of people, and gut-directed hypnotherapy. So what they've done is, in clinical research, they've compared gut-directed hypnotherapy intervention with a medical diet, which we know works in the short term for people with IBS. And what they've shown over, I think it was like a 9-week study, is that both groups had equal improvement in their IBS symptoms. Now, in clinic, when I see people, they always say to me, no, it's only diet, And actually, in many cases, and according to this research, you can get equal efficacy, equal benefit by just learning to relax that gut-brain axis, which is actually one of the underlying causes or mechanisms of irritable bowel syndrome, is a dysfunction between the gut and the brain.
So interesting. Thank you so much for everything you shared. It's such a fascinating topic, and this book is just going to be so helpful for people. And I hope the government take you on and then spread the message far and wide about our immune systems and our guts. Where can people find out more about you, and anything else you want to share where people can connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm at the Gut Health Doctor across all social media panels, or you can jump online, theguthealthdoctor.com, and I've got loads of free recipes and resources there. If people are wanting to get the book, then I would recommend pre-ordering it, because Penguin have very nicely given a pre-order little gift where you get this Plant Points planner magnet that you put on your fridge, and it helps you over the week, tally up how many different types of plants you're having. And we do it with a lot of our friends and family, get a bit of a competition going, a healthy competition, to see how many extra plants people can get into their diet each and every week.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much for everything you shared.
Thanks, Chloe. It's been a pleasure.